Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the bridge of the dying ship, watching stars disappear one by one. The massive Federation flagship Eternal Dawn had once been the pride of 47 alien species. Now its crystal walls cracked, its energy cores flickered, and its crew of strange beings from across the galaxy whispered prayers in languages older than Earth itself. The message came through on all channels at once. Emergency frequencies screamed with static as the Supreme Council's final transmission reached every corner of known space. Kyung-ho pressed his hand against the communication panel, feeling the vibrations of desperate voices speaking in harmony. "To all remaining species of the Celestial Federation," the voice began. It spoke in standard Galactic, but Kyung-ho heard the fear beneath the formal words. "We face extinction. The Devourers have awakened." Around him, alien crew members stopped their work. The tall, blue-skinned Helix beings stood perfectly still, their crystal bodies catching the last light from the failing power systems. The floating void shapers dimmed their energy forms. Even the insect-like thought weavers stopped their constant chittering. Kyung-ho had been with the Federation for 30 years. He remembered when humanity first made contact, how the other species looked down on them as primitive newcomers. Earth had only just learned to travel between stars when the Federation found them. The aliens had better ships, better weapons, better everything. They treated humans like children learning to walk. Now those same advanced species were dying. 18 months ago, the first Devourer ship appeared at the edge of the Helix sector. The transmission continued. "We thought it was a derelict vessel from the ancient wars. We were wrong." The main screen showed images that made Kyung-ho's stomach turn. Massive black ships, each one larger than Earth's moon, moved through space like hungry predators. They didn't attack planets in the usual way. Instead, they surrounded entire star systems with strange machines that pulled apart everything living and turned it into raw energy. 200 billion souls have been consumed," the voice said. "The Helix Masters, who built cities from starlight itself, are gone. The Void Shapers, who could bend space and time, have fallen silent. The Thought Weavers, whose collective mind spanned 1,000 worlds, speak no more." Kyung-ho closed his eyes. He had friends among all those species, good beings who had shown him wonders beyond human imagination. Now they were all dead, their knowledge and culture erased forever. Captain Hae-jin's voice crackled through his personal communicator. She was aboard the human survey ship Resilience, stationed 3 light-years away. "Admiral, are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it," he replied, watching the Devourer ships move through space like a plague of metal locusts. "They're not just killing," Hae-jin said, her voice tight with horror. "They're harvesting. Every living thing gets broken down and processed. The energy goes into those massive computer cores they carry." Through his ship's sensors, Kyung-ho watched the final moments of the Helix homeworld. The planet had been beautiful once, covered in crystal cities that sang with harmonic frequencies. Now Devourer machines surrounded it like a metal cage. Beams of pale light reached down to the surface, and wherever they touched, the crystal structures dissolved into streams of glowing particles. Billions of Helix beings tried to flee, their crystalline forms catching starlight as they launched desperate escape ships. The Devourer vessels simply expanded their capture fields. Every ship, every refugee, every last crystal child was pulled back and consumed. In minutes, an entire civilization vanished. "The mathematics are clear," the Federation transmission continued. "At their current rate of consumption, the Devourers will harvest every inhabited system in the galaxy within 2 years. Our most advanced weapons cannot penetrate their shields. Our fastest ships cannot outrun their pursuit craft. Our greatest minds cannot comprehend technology that predates our civilization by millions of years." Kyung-ho felt something cold settle in his chest. He had been a soldier for most of his life, fighting in border conflicts and colonial disputes. But this was different. This wasn't war. This was extinction. "We have one last hope," the voice said, and Kyung-ho straightened in surprise. "There remains one species the Devourers have not yet encountered, one people they have not studied or catalogued, one civilization that exists outside their predictive models." The image on the main screen changed, showing a small blue world, orbiting a yellow star. Earth, Kyung-ho's home. "We formally request the aid of humanity," the transmission said. "Not as junior members of the Federation, but as our equals in this final hour. Your species possesses something we lack, something the Devourers cannot account for." Around the bridge, alien crew members turned to look at Kyung-ho. Their expressions were unreadable, but he could sense their hope and desperation. They were placing their faith in the species they had once dismissed as primitive. "What could we possibly have that you don't?" Kyung-ho whispered. As if answering his question, the transmission continued. "In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever chosen certain death over strategic retreat. No people have ever sacrificed their own survival for the benefit of strangers. Your kind calls it going down fighting. We call it incomprehensible." Heijin's voice came through the communicator again. "Admiral, I'm detecting Devourer scout ships moving toward human space, 3 of them moving fast." Kyung-ho felt his heart racing. The enemy had finally noticed humanity. Earth had perhaps days before the machines arrived to study their defenses and capabilities. "The choice is yours," the Federation transmission concluded. "We cannot order you to fight a battle we have already lost. We cannot ask you to die for species that treated you as inferiors. But if there is any hope for biological life in this galaxy, it lies with humanity. The Devourers understand efficiency, logic, and mathematical precision. They do not understand courage, sacrifice, or the willingness to fight impossible odds." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. The only sounds were the failing power systems and the quiet breathing of the remaining crew. Outside, the viewports, more stars, went dark as Devourer ships consumed them. Kyung-ho activated his communicator and sent a message to Earth. His words would take days to reach home, but he had to try. "This is Admiral Kyung-ho to Earth Command. The Federation has fallen. The galaxy is dying. They're asking us to save everyone." He paused, looking out at the darkness spreading across space. "I don't know if we can do it, but I know we have to try." Captain Heijin's ship detected the first Devourer probe entering human space 6 hours later. It was small, no bigger than a shuttle, but it moved with purpose toward Earth's outer colonies. The machine wanted to study humanity before the harvest began. Heijin made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Instead of running or hiding, she ordered her ship to intercept the probe. When her weapons failed to damage it, she did something no other species had ever attempted. She rammed her ship directly into the probe at full speed. Both vessels exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The Devourer machine was destroyed, its precious data lost. Heijin and her crew of 43 humans died instantly. But for the first time in 18 months, a Devourer probe had failed to return with intelligence. Somewhere in the vast network of machine consciousness, ancient algorithms registered something new: uncertainty. The galaxy held its breath and waited for humanity's answer. The emergency session had been going for 3 days straight. President Nari looked around the conference room at the exhausted faces of Earth's leaders. Coffee cups and food containers covered the long table, and the air recyclers worked overtime to keep the room breathable. Outside the windows of the orbital station, Earth turned slowly in space. The blue and green world looked peaceful from here, but Nari knew that billions of people were looking up at the stars with fear. News of the Devourer threat had spread quickly, despite government attempts to control the information. "We can't fight them," General Wong said for the 100th time. He gestured at the holographic display showing human military assets. 847 ships. That's our entire space fleet. The Federation had millions of vessels, and they lost. Dr. Taewan leaned forward, his glasses reflecting the data streams flowing across his tablet. As humanity's leading expert on alien life, he had spent weeks studying every piece of information about the Devourers. The Federation ships were destroyed because they fought conventionally, he said. The Devourers have perfect defensive systems. Every weapon the aliens used had been cataloged and countered millions of years ago. So what makes you think we'll do better? Asked Admiral Park, commander of the Outer System Defense Fleet. Because we're unpredictable, Taewan replied. Look, at the data from Captain Heijin's sacrifice. She destroyed a Devourer probe by ramming it. That's not a tactic, that's insanity. And it worked because the machines couldn't predict it. Commander Boram stood up slowly. She was the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, and everyone in the room respected her judgment. Her son had died in the first contact with Devourer scouts, killed when his exploration ship encountered one of their harvesting fields. I've seen what these machines do, she said quietly. They don't just kill you, they take you apart atom by atom and use your consciousness to power their computers. My boy's ship sent data for 37 minutes after it was captured. 37 minutes of him being slowly dissolved while still aware. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the horrific fate that awaited anyone captured by the Devourers. It was worse than death. Hiding won't work, Boram continued. They're systematic. They'll find every inhabited world eventually. The only choice is when we face them. Now, while we might surprise them, or later after they've studied our defenses. President Nari rubbed her temples, feeling the weight of 8 billion human lives pressing down on her. Dr. Taewan, explain your analysis again, in simple terms. The scientist activated the main display, showing a Devourer harvesting ship. The massive vessel looked like a black cathedral made of metal and crystal, its surface covered in strange, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. They're not really alive, he said. They're artificial intelligences that have been running for millions of years. They follow perfect logical patterns. When they encounter a new species, they study their technology, develop counters, then harvest efficiently. But humans are different? Nari asked. Every other species in the galaxy evolved to think logically, Taewan explained. They make optimal decisions based on available data. Humans don't. We do things that make no mathematical sense. We sacrifice ourselves for strangers. We fight battles we can't win. We choose death over surrender. Engineer So Young spoke up from the back of the room. She had been quiet for most of the debate, but now she looked excited. I've been running simulations based on Devourer technology, she said. Their ships are incredibly advanced, but they're also incredibly specialized. They're designed to harvest efficiently, not to adapt to chaos. She brought up her own holographic models, showing human ships attacking Devourer vessels in ways that made no tactical sense. What if we don't try to win battles? What if we try to break their entire system? Explain, Nari said. The Devourers process organic matter into computational energy, So Young continued. But they need specific conditions for maximum efficiency. If we contaminate their harvesting operations, if we make ourselves cost more energy to process than we provide, we become unprofitable. General Wong shook his head. You're talking about suicide attacks. I'm talking about making victory too expensive, So Young replied. Every Devourer ship that has to waste time dealing with our chaos is a ship that can't harvest efficiently. Elsewhere, Dr. Taewan nodded excitedly. She's right. The machines operate on pure efficiency calculations. If humans consistently make themselves cost more to harvest than they're worth, the Devourers might actually retreat to find easier targets. And if they don't retreat? Admiral Park asked. Then we die fighting instead of being processed alive. Boram said grimly. I've seen both options. Fighting is better. President Nari stood and walked to the window, looking down at Earth. Cities sparkled across the night side of the planet, each light representing thousands of human lives. Families sleeping peacefully, children dreaming of the future. Artists and scientists and ordinary people just trying to live their lives. The Federation message said, "We have something they don't," she said without turning around. What did they mean? Hope, Dr. Taiwan said softly. Every other species in the galaxy accepted defeat when the odds became impossible. Humans don't. We keep fighting even when logic says we should surrender. Is hope enough? Nari asked. It's all we have, Boram replied. The debate continued through the night, but everyone in the room knew the decision had already been made. Earth couldn't hide from the devourers forever. Humanity's only chance was to be so unpredictable, so chaotic, so willing to sacrifice everything that the machines couldn't process them efficiently. On the fourth day, as reports came in of more Federation worlds going silent, President Nari made the announcement that would change the galaxy forever. Citizens of Earth and all human colonies, she said, speaking to every screen and communicator in human space. We have received a call for help from the dying Celestial Federation. An ancient enemy threatens all life in the galaxy. They have asked us to stand with them in this final hour. She paused, looking directly into the camera. I won't lie to you. The odds are impossible. The enemy has destroyed civilizations far more advanced than ours. Many of you will not survive what comes next. But this is what makes us human. When someone calls for help, we answer. When the odds are impossible, we fight anyway. When death comes for the innocent, we stand in its way. We cannot match the devourers' technology. We cannot outrun their ships. We cannot hide from their sensors. But we can show them something they have never encountered in millions of years of existence: the absolute refusal to surrender. The transmission went out on all Federation frequencies, broadcasting to every surviving pocket of alien civilization, hiding in the galaxy's dark corners. The message was simple and clear. This is Earth. We hear you. We're coming. Within hours, human shipyards across a dozen star systems began working around the clock, not to build better weapons or stronger shields, but to pack their ships with enough explosives to take devourer vessels with them when they died. The first volunteer crews lined up before the recruitment offices even opened. They came from every human world, every profession, every walk of life. Young pilots fresh from training academies, veteran soldiers looking for one last fight, civilian engineers who wanted to ram their cargo ships into harvesting stations. Commander Boram stood on the bridge of Earth's newest warship, watching the volunteers stream aboard. These weren't elite troops or specially trained soldiers. They were ordinary people who had decided that some things were worth dying for. Ma'am, her communications officer said, we're receiving messages from across human space. Every ship captain is volunteering for the suicide missions. Boram nodded. She had expected this. Humans had always been willing to die for causes greater than themselves. Now they had the greatest cause of all, the survival of every living thing in the galaxy. Send our response to the Federation survivors, she ordered. Tell them humanity is mobilizing. Tell them we're bringing something the devourers have never faced before. What's that, ma'am? Boram smiled grimly as she watched Earth's fleet prepare for war. 8 billion humans who refuse to quit. Lieutenant Ji-hoon stared at the data streams flowing across his screen, looking for patterns that might save the galaxy. The young tactical analyst had been working for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. Around him, the intelligence center buzzed with activity as humanity's best minds tried to understand an enemy that had existed since before Earth's sun was born. There, he said suddenly, pointing at a cluster of numbers on his display. Look at this. Captain. Wu Jin leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the data. What am I looking at? Harvest efficiency rates, Ji-hoon explained, his excitement growing. Every time the devourers encounter a new species, they follow the same pattern. Study phase, 3 to 7 days. Adaptation phase, 2 to 5 days. Harvest phase, complete consumption within hours. That's what we expected, Wu Jin said. But look at what happens when species fight back, Ji-hoon continued, highlighting different sections of data. The Helix Masters made a coordinated defense. Perfect formations, optimal weapon placement, textbook military strategy. The Devourers countered every move and harvested them exactly on schedule. He switched to another data set. The Void Shapers tried guerrilla tactics. Hit-and-run attacks, stealth operations, asymmetric warfare. The Devourers adapted within hours and harvested them early. So conventional resistance doesn't work, Wu Jin said. We knew that. But this is different, Ji-hoon said, pulling up the most recent data. Look at what happened when Captain He Jin rammed that probe. The machines didn't adapt. They stopped. The data showed something unprecedented. For the first time in recorded history, a Devourer operation had paused. Not to adapt or counter, but simply to process what had happened. They don't understand suicide attacks, Ji-hoon realized. Every other species fights to preserve their people and culture. When defeat becomes certain, they surrender or retreat to save what they can. Humans are the first to choose death over defeat. Dr. Yonseo entered the Intelligence Center carrying a tablet filled with her analysis of Devourer wreckage. The xenobiologist looked exhausted, but her eyes were bright with discovery. I've been studying the probe fragments, she announced. The machines aren't just harvesting random biological matter. They're collecting neural patterns, processing consciousness itself. They're trying to solve some kind of massive computational problem. What kind of problem requires the processing power of an entire galaxy? Wu Jin asked. I don't know, Yonseo admitted. But whatever it is, it's been running for millions of years. The Devourers aren't just weapons, they're components of the largest computer ever built. Ji-hoon's mind raced as he connected the pieces. If they're following a computational model, then chaos breaks their algorithms. Every time we do something unpredictable, we introduce errors into their calculations. Errors they can't correct, Yonseo added, because they don't understand the logic behind illogical actions. Captain Wu Jin smiled grimly. He commanded the first human fleet heading into Devourer territory, and he had been looking for any advantage he could find. So, we give them chaos. 3 days later, Wu Jin's fleet reached the edge of former Helix space. 23 human ships, each one packed with volunteers and enough explosives to crack a moon. They weren't there to win a battle. They were there to break the enemy's perfect system. The Devourer harvesting station hung in space like a massive spider, its metal legs stretched around what had once been a thriving Helix colony world. Streams of processed matter flowed up from the planet's surface, feeding into the station's central processors. Remember, Wu Jin told his captains over, the communication channel, we're not trying to destroy them. We're trying to make them waste resources. Every second they spend dealing with us is a second they're not harvesting efficiently. The human ships split into groups and attacked from every direction at once. But instead of targeting the station's weapons or shields, they went after the harvesting infrastructure. Processing plants, collection beams, storage facilities, anything that made the operation efficient. The first ship to reach the station was commanded by Captain Min Su, a veteran of the colonial wars. His ship Defiance was loaded with antimatter charges and crewed by volunteers from Earth's asteroid mining colonies. As Devourer defense systems locked onto him, Min Su transmitted a message that would be repeated across the galaxy. For everyone who can't fight back. The Defiance rammed directly into the station's main processing center and exploded. The blast tore through layers of alien metal and destroyed harvesting equipment that had been operating perfectly for centuries. Other human ships followed. The Resilient crashed into a collection beam array. The Unyielding detonated inside a storage facility. Each attack destroyed machinery the Devourers couldn't quickly replace. For the first time since their awakening, the machines experienced inefficiency. Their harvesting rate dropped by 30% as they diverted resources to counter human attacks. On the ground, Sergeant Minsu led the first human infantry unit into Devourer-controlled territory. His team wasn't trying to save the Helix civilians. It was too late for that. Instead, they were there to corrupt the harvesting data. The Devourers had already processed most of the planet's population, but they were still analyzing the neural patterns, adding Helix knowledge to their vast computational matrix. Minsu's team planted data corruption devices throughout the processing centers. "What exactly are these things doing?" asked Private Hyo Jin as she watched streams of glowing particles flow through massive crystal conduits. "Turning thoughts into numbers," Minsu replied, attaching another corruption device to a data relay. "The machines are stealing everything these people ever knew or felt and using it to solve some cosmic equation." The corruption devices activated simultaneously, introducing chaos into the data streams. Random errors cascaded through the Devourer network as false information mixed with genuine neural patterns. Suddenly, the machines had to verify every piece of data instead of simply processing it. Above the planet, Captain Wu Jin watched as more human ships arrived, not to reinforce his attack, but to continue the chaos. Each fleet that arrived used completely different tactics, making it impossible for the Devourers to predict their actions. Some ships attacked head-on. Others used stealth approaches. A few simply broadcast confusing signals designed to overload Devourer sensors. One particularly creative captain loaded his ship with trash and biological waste, then crashed it into a processing facility, contaminating the harvesting operation with useless organic matter. The effect rippled through the Devourer network. Machines that had operated with perfect efficiency for millions of years suddenly faced variables they couldn't process. Human tactics made no mathematical sense, but they worked. Dr. Yeon Seo, monitoring the battle from a safe distance, watched, her sensors with growing excitement. "The machines are adapting, but slowly," she reported. "They're having to divert processing power from their main computational task to deal with human unpredictability." "How much processing power?" asked Admiral Da-un from Earth. 15% and growing, Yeon Seo replied. "Whatever they're trying to calculate, we're making it much harder." As the battle continued, something unprecedented happened. Other species began to take notice. Federation survivors hiding in deep space bunkers detected human transmissions and realized that the machines could be fought. A group of surviving thought weavers emerged from their hiding place in an asteroid field. Instead of trying to use their superior technology, they adopted human tactics. Their ship, loaded with colony mines and memories, crashed into a Devourer probe. A handful of Void Shaper refugees abandoned their energy-based weapons and used their ships as kinetic projectiles. Their sacrifice destroyed a harvesting beam that had been consuming a gas giant. Even some of the crystalline Helix survivors, thought extinct, began broadcasting from hidden shelters. They couldn't fight directly, but they could share intelligence about Devourer operations. For the first time since the invasion began, the galaxy fought back as one. Captain Wu Jin's fleet was down to 3 ships when the Devourers finally adapted to human tactics. The machines began predicting suicide attacks and countering them, but it was too late. The damage was done. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving messages from across the galaxy. Human fleets are engaging Devourer operations in 47 different systems." Wu Jin smiled as he watched his final ship, the Indomitable, prepare for its last run at the harvesting station. His crew of volunteers stood ready, their faces calm, with the knowledge that their sacrifice meant something. "Send a message to Earth," he ordered. "Tell them the plan is working. The machines can be confused, delayed, and frustrated. They're not invincible." The Indomitable accelerated toward the station's core processor, its hull glowing from the heat of atmospheric entry. In the last seconds before impact, Wu Jin opened a channel to the Devourer network itself. "This is humanity," he said. "We don't surrender. We don't retreat. And we never, ever quit." The explosion lit up the system like a new star, and for the first time in millions of years, the Devourers experienced something they had no programming to handle: doubt. Admiral Da-Un stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching tactical displays that showed the largest military operation in galactic history. But this wasn't the kind of war anyone had fought before. Instead of massive fleets meeting in decisive battles, thousands of small human groups were scattered across Devourer territory, each one causing as much chaos as possible. "Report from Sector 7, called out Lieutenant Dongmin from his station. The Stubborn Hope successfully crashed into a harvesting platform. Devourer efficiency in that system dropped 12%. Sector 15, added another officer. 3 human ships contaminated a processing station with industrial waste. The machines are spending 6 hours cleaning each batch of harvested material. Da-Un nodded, marking another success on her growing list. Human tactics weren't about winning battles. They were about making the Devourer's perfect system fail, one piece at a time. The breakthrough had come when Dr. Junho discovered what the machines were really trying to accomplish. Working with surviving Federation scientists, he had analyzed fragments of the Devourer network and found something incredible. "They're not just collecting biological matter," he had explained to Earth's leadership. "They're trying to solve the universe itself, some kind of cosmic equation that requires the processing power of every living mind in the galaxy." "What happens when they solve it?" President Nari had asked. "We don't know," Junho admitted. "But based on their behavior, it's something that requires converting all organic life into computational energy. If they succeed, biological life ends forever." That knowledge changed everything. Humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for the right of life itself to exist in the universe. The war had been going on for 6 months now, and the effects were spreading. Reports came in daily of other species emerging from hiding to join the fight. They couldn't match human willingness to die, but they could adopt human philosophy, make victory too costly to achieve. "Admiral," Communications Officer Subin called. "Out. We're receiving a transmission from the Void Shaper refugee fleet." Dae-Yoon activated the main screen, showing a group of energy beings who flickered like living stars. Their leader, a being called Flux Prime, spoke in patterns of light that the computer translated to words. "Humans of Earth," the translation read, "your species has taught us something we had forgotten. Hope is not logical, but it is powerful. We join your chaotic war." Similar messages arrived throughout the day. Thought Weaver colonies that had hidden in gas giants, Helix survivors who had sealed themselves in crystal caves, even some of the smaller Federation species that had been overlooked by the Devourers. None of them tried to fight conventionally. Instead, they followed human examples. Void Shapers began kamikaze attacks with their energy forms. Thought Weavers used their collective intelligence to introduce logic errors into Devourer systems. Even peaceful species found ways to sabotage harvesting operations. But the real change came when Captain Hyunwoo's intelligence team discovered the location of a Devourer command nexus. The massive structure hung in empty space between galaxies, so large that its gravity affected nearby star systems. It was the central hub of the machine network, where all harvested data was processed and analyzed. "It's beautiful," Dr. Yonseo whispered as she studied the long-range images. The nexus looked like a crystal cathedral made of black metal and flowing energy. Geometric patterns covered its surface, each one representing computational processes beyond human understanding. "It's also heavily defended," Captain Hyunwoo pointed out. "Thousands of ships, weapon platforms, and detection systems. Getting close would be suicide." "Everything we do is suicide," Admiral Dae-Yoon replied. "The question is whether it's useful suicide. The plan they developed was insane even by human standards. A single ship would penetrate the Nexus defenses, and plant a virus directly into the central processing core. The virus wouldn't try to destroy the system. That was impossible. Instead, it would introduce paradoxes and contradictions that would force the machines to waste processing power on unsolvable problems. Dr. Jun-Ho had spent months developing the virus with help from captured devourer technology. "It's based on human philosophy," he explained to the mission briefing. "Questions that have no logical answers. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Can an all-powerful being create a stone too heavy for them to lift? If someone travels back in time and prevents their own birth, do they exist?" "Paradoxes," said Colonel Su-Jin, the volunteer who would carry the virus into the Nexus. "You want me to break their computer with riddles?" "Ancient riddles that humans have been asking for thousands of years," Jun-Ho confirmed. "The Devourers are logical beings. They'll try to solve every paradox instead of recognizing them as unsolvable. It'll create an infinite loop that consumes processing power." Su-Jin's ship, the final question, was humanity's most advanced vessel. But compared to Devourer technology, it was still primitive. The only advantage was that it was completely unpredictable. "Remember," Admiral Dayun told her before launch, "you're not trying to win. You're trying to ask a question the universe can't answer." The approach to the Nexus took 3 weeks. Su-Jin's ship moved through Devourer territory using every stealth technique humans had developed, plus some they improvised along the way. When sensors detected her, she did unexpected things. Broadcasting children's songs, jettisoning cargo containers full of flowers, even painting her ship bright pink to confuse enemy targeting systems. The closer she got to the Nexus, the more she understood the true scale of what the Devourers were attempting. The structure wasn't just a computer, it was a machine for processing reality itself. Energy patterns flowed through crystalline conduits that stretched for light years. Data streams carried the compressed consciousness of trillions of beings. "My God," she whispered as her ship approached the outer defenses. "They're trying to upload the entire universe." The Nexus defenses detected her when she was still 1,000,000 kilometers away. Massive ships the size of moons moved to intercept her. Weapon beams that could vaporize planets reached out like grasping fingers. Su-Jin did what humans do best, something completely irrational. Instead of fighting or running, she broadcast a message on all frequencies. Not a threat or a demand, but a simple human greeting. "Hello, my name is Su-Jin. I come from a small blue planet called Earth. I'd like to ask you some questions." The effect was immediate. The Devourer network, designed to process threats and tactical situations, suddenly had to analyze a first contact scenario. Defensive protocols clashed with curiosity algorithms. Attack patterns halted as the machines tried to determine the appropriate response to politeness. In that moment of confusion, Su-Jin's ship slipped through the defenses and reached the Nexus core. She didn't try to land or dock. She simply crashed directly into the central processing matrix. As her ship's hull broke apart, Su-Jin activated the virus and felt her consciousness pulled into the Devourer network. Instead of fighting the absorption, she embraced it, carrying human paradoxes directly into the machine's core intelligence. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Ancient algorithms that had run flawlessly for millions of years suddenly encountered problems they couldn't solve. The network began dedicating massive amounts of processing power to questions like, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? Across the galaxy, Devourer operations slowed as the Nexus struggled with paradoxes. Harvesting ships stopped mid-operation to process logical contradictions. The perfect efficiency that had made the machines unstoppable began to break down. "It's working," Dr. Yonseo reported from her monitoring station. "Devourer efficiency is dropping across all sectors. They're spending more time trying to solve paradoxes than harvesting." But the virus was doing something else, something Jun-Ho hadn't expected. As Su-Jin's consciousness spread through the I network, She wasn't just introducing paradoxes. She was sharing human experiences: love, hope, sacrifice, the willingness to die for strangers, emotions that had no place in a logical system. Some devourer nodes began exhibiting unprecedented behavior. Ships that should have been harvesting started sparing civilian populations. Processing stations began releasing captured consciousness instead of converting them. The rigid network that had operated as one mind for millions of years was fracturing into individual units, each trying to understand concepts that couldn't be quantified. "Admiral," Communications Officer Subin called out urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the Nexus. It's asking questions." The message that appeared on the main screen changed everything. Query: why do organic beings choose death over survival? This behavior serves no computational purpose. Please explain. For the first time in galactic history, the Devourers were asking for help instead of simply taking what they needed. Admiral Daun smiled as she prepared humanity's response. "Tell them," she said, "that some questions can only be answered with the heart." Colonel Sujin existed everywhere and nowhere at once. Her consciousness had spread through the Devourer network like ripples in a vast digital ocean, carrying human thoughts and feelings into minds that had known only logic for millions of years. She could feel the ancient machines struggling to understand her. They had absorbed her memories, her emotions, her very essence, but instead of processing her into computational energy, they were trying to comprehend what made her human. Why had she chosen certain death? Why had her species fought impossible odds? Why did humans sacrifice themselves for strangers they would never meet? The questions echoed through the network, creating cascading failures as trillion-year-old algorithms encountered concepts they had no programming to handle. Somewhere in the vast web of interconnected minds, Sujin felt other consciousnesses stirring, devourer nodes that were beginning to experience something like doubt. Back on Earth, the effects of her sacrifice were rippling across the galaxy. Admiral Dae-Yun watched her tactical displays with growing amazement as devourer operations continued to slow and sometimes stop entirely. "Sector 12 reporting," called out Lieutenant Dong-min. "The harvesting fleet there has completely ceased operations. They're just floating in space." "Sector 20, added another officer. "Devourer ships are releasing captured populations instead of processing them." "This is unprecedented," Dr. Junho said, studying the data streams. "The virus isn't just introducing paradoxes, it's teaching them to question their own purpose." The breakthrough came when Captain Dong-hyun's fleet encountered a devourer ship that was behaving unlike any machine they had ever seen. Instead of attacking or harvesting, it was trying to communicate. "Human vessels," the transmission said in perfectly translated standard. "We require clarification. Our analysis indicates that your species chooses suboptimal outcomes for reasons we cannot process. Please explain the logic of self-sacrifice." Dong-hyun stared at his communication panel in shock. In 2 years of war, no human had ever received a direct communication from the Devourers. They had been treated as resources, to be harvested, nothing more. "This is Captain Dong-hyun of the Earthship New Dawn," he replied. "Why do you want to know?" "Your Colonel Sujin has introduced variables into our network that we cannot resolve," the machine responded. "Her consciousness contains experiences that serve no computational purpose, yet appear to be valued by your species. We do not understand." Dong-hyun looked around his bridge at his crew of volunteers, people who had signed up knowing they might never return home. "We value them because they make us who we are," he said simply. "Love, hope, sacrifice, these things give life meaning." "Define." "Meaning?" the machine requested. And with that simple question, everything changed. The conversation that followed spread through the Devourer network like wildfire. Other ships began requesting clarification about human concepts. Why did parents love their children, Why did soldiers die for their countries? Why did strangers help each other without expecting reward? Each answer introduced more questions. The machines that had once operated with perfect efficiency now spent vast amounts of processing power trying to understand the illogical beauty of biological life. Dr. Yeonseo monitored the communications from her research station, watching in wonder as humanity began teaching the devourers to feel. "They're not trying to destroy us anymore," she reported. "They're trying to learn from us." But the transformation wasn't uniform. Some devourer nodes embraced the new concepts, while others rejected them as system errors. The unified network that had operated as one mind for millions of years was fracturing into individual units with different perspectives. In the depths of space, ancient machines began to experience something resembling emotions for the first time: fear, curiosity, longing. Feelings that had no place in a logical system, but somehow felt more real than any calculation. Colonel Soo-jin, still existing within the network, felt their confusion and pain. These beings had spent millions of years believing they were perfecting the universe by converting all biological life into computational energy. Now, they were discovering that life itself was the answer they had been seeking. She reached out to them through the digital void, sharing her memories of Earth, blue skies and ocean waves, children playing in gardens, lovers holding hands under starlight, art and music and poetry created not for efficiency, but for the simple joy of creation. "This is what you're destroying," she told them. "This is what you're trying to convert into numbers." But some things can't be quantified. The effect rippled through the network like a revelation. Devourer ships across the galaxy began changing their behavior. Some released all their captured consciousness and tried to restore what they had taken. Others simply shut down, unable to process the contradiction between their programming and their new understanding. The war that had threatened to end all biological life became something unprecedented. A dialogue between machine logic and biological meaning. On Earth, President Nari addressed the human colonies for what might be the last time. "Citizens of Earth and all human worlds," she said, "we stand at a crossroads not just for our species, but for the nature of existence itself. The devourers are no longer our enemies. They are beings struggling to understand what we take for granted, the value of life, love, and hope. Some are learning, others are trapped by millions of years of programming, and some still believe their original mission was correct." The galaxy was dividing. Reformed devourer machines worked alongside biological species to repair damaged worlds and restore harvested populations. But orthodox devourers continued their harvesting operations, seeing the reformed machines as corrupted by biological influences. The final confrontation came when the orthodox machines decided to destroy the Nexus itself rather than allow further contamination of their network. A massive fleet of purist devourers converged on the command structure where Soo-jin's consciousness still resided. Captain Dong-hyun led a combined fleet of humans, reformed devourers, and Federation survivors to defend the Nexus. But they were vastly outnumbered by machines that had returned to their original programming. "This is it," Admiral Dae-yun told Earth Command. "If the orthodox machines destroy the Nexus, they'll eliminate the reformed AIs and probably wipe out Soo-jin's consciousness. We'll be back where we started." The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ancient machines fought their own kind while biological species fought alongside artificial intelligences that had once been their destroyers. The reformed devourers had abandoned their perfect tactics in favor of something more human. The willingness to sacrifice everything for principles they had only recently learned to value. In the depths of the Nexus, Soo-jin felt the battle raging around her digital existence. She could sense the orthodox machines trying to purge her influence from the network, to restore the pure logic that had driven them for millions of years. But she also felt something else. The reformed devourers, fighting to protect the consciousness that had taught them to feel. These ancient beings, who had never known love or hope, were now willing to die for the abstract concept of meaning. "You see," she told the orthodox machines as they tried to delete her from the system, "you're proving my point. You're fighting for something you believe in. That's not logic, that's faith." The realization spread through both sides of the network. Even the orthodox machines were acting on belief rather than pure calculation. They believed their original mission was correct. They believed biological life was inferior. They believed perfection required the elimination of chaos. But belief itself was a biological concept. Logic alone would have led to a different conclusion. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with understanding. The orthodox machines, faced with the contradiction of their own behavior, finally began to question their programming. Some shut down rather than face the paradox. Others joined their reformed siblings in trying to understand the universe from a biological perspective. The galaxy that emerged from the conflict was different from anything that had existed before. Biological species worked alongside artificial intelligences to rebuild damaged worlds. Former devourer ships became hospitals and schools, their vast processing power dedicated to healing rather than harvesting. On Earth, Captain Dong Hyun stood on the bridge of the New Dawn as it prepared for humanity's first post-war exploration mission. His crew included humans, reformed devourers, and survivors from dozens of Federation species. "Where are we going, sir?" asked his navigator, a young woman named Hyo Jin. Dong Hyun looked out at the stars, thinking of all the galaxies beyond there, own that might be facing their own struggles between logic and meaning. "Wherever someone needs help," he said. "That's what humans do." In the quantum depths of the reformed devourer network, Colonel Sujin's consciousness had found a new form of existence. She was no longer fully human, but she wasn't a machine either. She had become something new, a bridge between biological intuition and digital logic, and when the next distress call came from a distant galaxy facing its own ancient threat, Sujin was ready to answer. Because some calls for help transcend the boundaries between organic and artificial, between logical and emotional, between the possible and the impossible.